Hi, I'm Tim Weatherford, lead instructor from Tulsa Welding School. Today we're going to talk about a few different types of welding processes: stick welding, TIG welding, MIG welding, and this video is going to be about MIG welding. So just a few basic things about what is MIG welding. As far as the types of welding, it's probably the easiest one to actually pick up and just take off with. It's normally, as far as techniques, there's a few different techniques you can use. Some people use like a C pattern, a E pattern, to where it looks like a cursive E as you're welding along. It's usually a pretty common type of welding patterns. As far as ease of use, once you get your machine dialed in, it's very simple to do. Really, all you do is just pull the trigger and go along with it. The only other thing that you would need, other than what you see in this setup, is going to be a welding hood. And there's a different variety, or a large variety of different types of welding hoods that you can use: auto darkeners, fixed shades, on and on and on. And that comes down to personal preference. So let's go over a little bit about the machine and a few things to keep in mind when you're picking the machine, whether you're, what you're wanting to do with it, if you're okay with using gasless flux core, whether you're okay with using a shielded wire, whether you're using MIG or dual shielded flux core, which that's what this type of machine is. It can do, it can really do gasless flux core, it can do dual shielded flux core, it can also do MIG welding. So all pretty well covers all the bases with it. So as far as what machine do you need, or which MIG welding machine do you need, really depends on the type of welding that you're going to do, or the type of material that you're going to be welding on. Is it really thick? Is it thinner stuff? That's all the things that kind of go into play. As far as the machine itself, they come in, like for home use, you're looking at a 110 weld machine or a 240 weld machine. So that's going to be your welding circuit. You need to make sure that your wherever you're trying to set it up, it has either 110 or 240. If you're not confident with it, you may want to talk to an electrician about it, whether you can make sure that your circuits are going to be able to hold up to it. So other than that, once you kind of identify the type of weld machine that you're wanting, as far as setup for it, how do you set it up? What are your settings that you're going to use with it? Most of the machines, they make it pretty simple for you. They have, usually have a chart underneath the hood, or they may have a little pamphlet that comes with it that tells you the wire size that you're going to want to use with it, or wire sizes. It may be able to use a variety of sizes, whether like this roll that we happen to have right here is a .030, and they go up from there: .030, .035, 045, and so on and so forth. So other things to keep in mind when you're picking a welding machine: do you want how much welding you're going to be doing with it? Are you going to need small rolls of wire? Are you going to need a larger roll of wire, which this machine takes? It can either do the small rolls, or it can do a larger 10-pound roll. All things you need to kind of ask yourself when you're picking the machine out. Other things, if you are going to use a regular MIG wire, then you're going to need to make sure you're using a shielded type of machine, which this one is. It comes, most of them come with a regulator that's going to determine how much volume of gas that's flowing over your weld while you're welding. That's going to kind of make you, or you're going to have to think whether you're going to use the dual shielded or just the gasless flux core. If your machine doesn't have this type of setup with it, or it may not be capable for it, then you're definitely going to be limited to like a self-shielded flux core. So once you finally determine what you're welding on, is it going to be thicker material? Is it going to be thinner material? All right, we're going to take that. We'll take that information and we'll go over to our chart. It'll tell us, you know, for 18 gauge carbon steel that we're going to be running in between the 4 to 7 range on the voltage. And then from there, you're going to be in anywhere in the 50 to 70 range on your wire speed. So all helpful, handy things that goes along with this, with machines like these. Like I said, there's not, if you're going to get into MIG welding or you're going to do some, you know, home welding, whatever, you know, a MIG welder is a pretty good starting point. It's usually a lot easier with the technique that you're going to start with. You're not trying to start stick rods. Sometimes that can get a little tedious and can kind of discourage people. So as far as, you know, a good setup for, you know, just a hobby welder, you know, home repairs, whatever you may need, MIG welding or a MIG welder would be a pretty good, you know, a pretty good alternative. So as far as other things that you'll need whenever you know, get your machine, other things to make sure you have on hand. One of the things is going to be a contact tip. Make sure it's sized appropriate for your wire type. Make sure it's also the appropriate one for the type of machine you're using. So the spool of wire that we have is 0.030. Well, we want to make sure that our wire or our contact tip is sized appropriate for it, which this one is 0.030, right where we want to be. If it happens to be the wire is larger than the contact tip, well, if it's, you know, if we're using a 0.035 and we try to put it through a 0.030, it's not going to fit. Same way, if we're using too large of a contact tip for the wire, we're going to have some issues there with the machine's going to, sometimes it's going to pop, it's going to sputter, the wire's going to try to burn back. It's just because it's not making good contact. So always things to keep in mind to make sure you're, you know, keep everything kind of flowing well. Something else that you probably want to have a few of on hand is your MIG nozzles, or the nozzles that you're going to be using. They're pretty standard for these types of machines. You don't have to worry about any different sized nozzle openings. Some do for like MIG welding. Some of them you want to use a larger opening if you're doing flux core welding, but most generally, you know, one size, good to go. For example, with MIG welding, you know, you might have some, you know, this would be kind of a thicker piece of material for this machine, but, you know, it's all things that it has the capability of doing. So as far as the patterning, you can see you can make something like a cursive E pattern, and you could get kind of this like stack of dimes look to it. And the other things that you can do with this machine is use like the gas or dual shield flux core. It's going to look something similar to this. It's going to be a lot smoother finish to it. It's also going to run a lot hotter with this too. So if you're running some thinner materials, you really want to make that decision whether you want to use a flux core or not. So that's kind of just the basic rundown of a MIG welding setup.